I've been working at this tech startup for about 8 months now, and I thought I had the whole hot desking thing figured out. You know how these modern offices are, right? Everything's supposed to be flexible and collaborative. 200 desks spread across an open floor plan, huge windows overlooking the city, plants everywhere, those weird ergonomic chairs that cost more than my first car, and every morning you book whatever desk you want through this app. Most people pick spots near their team, or by the windows or in the quiet zones. Me? I found this corner desk on the 3rd floor, kind of tucked away near the emergency exit, where hardly anyone ever sits. It became my spot. Not officially, but in that unspoken way where people just know, that's Jake's desk. Then one Monday morning, 3 weeks ago, I opened the booking app and saw that someone had reserved the desk right next to mine, desk 314. I stared at my phone screen for a solid minute. In 8 months, no one had ever sat there. Not once. The whole corner was essentially mine. I told myself it was probably just a mistake. Someone clicking the wrong desk. Or maybe a new hire who didn't know the unspoken desk politics yet. I didn't think much of it as I grabbed my coffee and headed upstairs. But when I got to my corner, there he was. Tall, dark hair pushed back like he'd just run his fingers through it. Wearing this deep green Henley that somehow looked both casual and put together. He was adjusting his monitor, completely focused, and I just kind of froze there holding my coffee like an idiot. I'd seen him around before. Caspian. He worked in product design, a few floors down usually. We'd passed each other in the kitchen, stood in the same elevator a handful of times. I knew his name only because I'd heard someone call it out across the cafeteria once and, yeah, okay, I'd maybe looked him up on the company directory afterward. Not in a weird way, just curious. He looked up and caught me staring. God, his eyes were this warm brown, almost amber in the morning light. He smiled, and I swear something in my chest did this little flip thing. "Hey," he said, "hope you don't mind. Everywhere else was booked." Which was absolutely not true. I'd literally just seen dozens of available desks on the app, but I just shrugged and said it was cool, no problem, plenty of room. My voice came out steadier than I expected. That whole first day, I was hyper-aware of him. The way he typed, fast and confident. How he'd lean back in his chair and stare at the ceiling when he was thinking. The fact that he drank his coffee black, no sugar, and went through like 4 cups before noon. Every time he shifted in his seat, I noticed. Every time he took a phone call and his voice dropped to that professional tone, I noticed. It was distracting as hell, and I got maybe half my usual work done. Tuesday morning, I opened the booking app fully expecting he'd be somewhere else. But no, desk 314, reserved by Caspian Reeves, and Wednesday, and Thursday. By Friday, I was starting to wonder if this was actually happening. If he was choosing to sit next to me specifically, or if I was reading way too much into a simple desk preference. Friday afternoon, around 3, he turned to me out of nowhere and asked if I wanted to grab coffee, just like that. "There's this place around the corner," he said. "Way better than the cafeteria sludge. I'm losing my mind staring at these wireframes." And what was I supposed to say? No, I was already shutting my laptop before I'd fully processed the question. The coffee shop was one of those small, cramped places with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. We squeezed into a tiny table by the window, our knees almost touching underneath. He ordered some elaborate pour-over situation, and we started talking about work, about the company's chaotic rebrand, about how the CEO kept using words like synergy and paradigm shift in meetings. Easy stuff, safe stuff. But then he asked me what I did outside of work, and I found myself actually telling him. About the photography hobby I'd been neglecting, about the novel I'd been trying to write for 2 years, about my family back in Ohio. And he listened. Really listened. Not just waiting for his turn to talk, but asking follow-up questions, leaning forward, completely present. He told me about growing up in Seattle, about his architecture degree that he'd never really used, about how he'd stumbled into design almost by accident. His whole face changed when he talked about things he cared about. More animated, more open. I couldn't stop watching the way his hands moved when he explained something. These graceful gestures that made even boring work stories seem interesting. We stayed for 2 hours. 2 hours that felt like 20 minutes. When we finally left, the sun was already setting, painting the street in orange and gold. We walked back to the office slowly, neither of us really wanting the conversation to end. At the building entrance, there was this moment, this pause. We were standing close, and he was looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Something soft, something that made my heart race. Then he just smiled and said, "See you Monday," and walked to his car. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying every moment, every word, trying to figure out what it meant, trying to figure out what I wanted it to mean. Because here's the thing, I dated women in college, had a girlfriend for almost 2 years. It ended amicably, just kind of fizzled out. And since then, I'd been on some dates, nothing serious, nothing that really clicked. I'd always assumed I just hadn't met the right person yet, but lying there in the dark, thinking about Caspian's laugh and the way he'd looked at me in the coffee shop, I felt something I'd never quite felt before. This pull, this want, and it terrified me. Monday came, and he was there again. Desk 314. He brought me a coffee. "Remembered you liked the vanilla oat milk thing," he said, setting it on my desk. Such a small gesture, but it made my entire morning. We fell into this rhythm, working in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing something funny we'd seen online, taking coffee breaks together. He started bringing lunch some days, always bringing enough to share. Homemade stuff, pasta salads, these amazing sandwiches, fruit he'd cut up that morning. "I always make too much," he'd say, but I was starting to suspect that wasn't quite true. People at work started noticing. Sarah from marketing made a comment about us being attached at the hip. Tom from engineering asked if we were working on a project together. I brushed it off, said we just happened to sit near each other, but inside, I was a mess. Because every day I was becoming more aware of how I felt, how I'd look forward to seeing him every morning, how my mood would lift the second he sat down, how I'd catch myself staring at his profile when he was focused on his screen, noticing the line of his jaw, the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks, how sometimes our hands would brush reaching for something, and I'd feel that touch for hours afterward. 3 weeks in, on a Thursday evening, most people had already left. We were both still working or pretending to work. The office was quiet, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew. He suddenly closed his laptop and turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" he said. His voice was different, nervous. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Why do you think I started sitting here?" he asked. I didn't know what to say. I'd been asking myself the same question for weeks. "Because everywhere else was booked," I offered weakly. He laughed, but it was a soft laugh, almost sad. "Jake," he said, and the way he said my name made something in me crack open. "I've been trying to work up the courage to talk to you for months. Every time I saw you in the elevator or the kitchen, I'd plan out something to say, and then chicken out. So I figured, maybe if I just sat next to you every day, something would happen naturally." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Something like what?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, really looked at me. "Something like this," he said quietly, and then he leaned in, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, but I didn't, I couldn't. I met him halfway, and when our lips touched, it was like everything suddenly made sense, every confused feeling, every sleepless night, every moment I'd spent overthinking. This was what I'd been missing, not just any connection, but this, him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper. His hand came up to cut my face and I leaned into it, into him. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. He pressed his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I sat here," he whispered. "I've wanted you to do that since the first day you sat here," I whispered back. And then we were both laughing, this relieved, giddy laughter. He kissed me again and again, like he was making up for lost time. We left the office together that night, hands intertwined, walked to his car in the parking garage, stealing kisses in the shadows. He drove me home, and we sat in his car outside my building for another hour, just talking. About everything. About how he'd known he was gay since high school. About how I was still figuring things out, but I knew what I felt for him was real. About how terrified and excited we both were. He kissed me goodnight at my door, soft and sweet, and promised to text me when he got home. That was 2 weeks ago. We're taking things slow, figuring it out as we go. But every morning he books desk 314, and every morning I book desk 313. Our corner of the office with 200 empty seats spread out around us. People definitely know now. We're not hiding it. His hand finds mine under the desk sometimes. We take our coffee breaks together, our lunch breaks. Last Friday we left work early and he took me to this gallery opening he'd been invited to, held my hand the entire time, introduced me to his friends, kept looking at me with this expression that made me feel like the only person in the room. I'm still processing everything. What it means about me, about my identity, about my future. But when I'm with Caspian, all those big questions seem smaller somehow, more manageable. Because whatever label I end up with, whatever journey I'm on, I know one thing for certain. I'm falling for him. Maybe I've been falling since that first Monday morning when I found him at desk 314. Maybe that's why it scared me so much. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew. Last night, we were at his apartment, cooking dinner together. Well, he was cooking. I was mostly just watching and handing him ingredients. He was telling me some story about his roommate in college, laughing, and the kitchen light was catching in his hair, and I just felt this overwhelming wave of happiness. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. And I realized that this, right here, was what I'd been missing in all those other relationships. This feeling of coming home, of finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and chooses you anyway. Chooses to sit next to you even when there are 200 other options. He caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing," I said. I'm really glad you picked desk 314. He set down the spoon he was holding and walked over to me, wrapped his arms around my waist. "Best decision I ever made," he said and kissed me. And standing there in his kitchen in his arms, I knew he was right. For both of us.